What would it be like if everyone understood that at the fundamental level we're all connected? How would that change the world? So the theme for today is evidence and applications of consciousness. And so I'm going to be offering a little bit of both of those, and I'm really going to be focusing on what I would say, or what I would argue is perhaps the most profound application of consciousness, and that's what I'd call personal awakening. That's using your consciousness to gain an understanding through direct experience of the true nature of reality, why we're here, answering all these big questions. And this is something that we've been doing at Monroe for quite a while. So there are two things that I've seen. Well, in my experience at Monroe, I've been lucky to come across a lot of people that are on this sort of journey of self-discovery or personal awakening. And I've started to see a lot of patterns in how people approach that journey and what they find along the way. And there are two elements that I found that are pretty important to this kind of personal awakening. One of those is direct experience. And this is kind of what we do at Monroe. This is our whole thing. Our programs that we offer are very experiential. We don't give people a lot of facts. We give people tools and techniques, and we train them and teach them how to access states of deep, sort of profound awareness and how to explore consciousness. And the other element that people need, that gets them sort of half of the way. The other thing that I found people need is some kind of framework for understanding those experiences. Understanding how it's possible to have them, because everything that we hear today in Western science and sort of materialism tells us that these things can't happen. These experiences are not real. So people really need kind of two of those elements. And for that reason, what I've found in my experience, and I know others have found it as well, is what we do at the Monroe Institute and what we get from My Big Toe and Tom's work are really the perfect complement to each other. They really work well together. And to me, they sort of complete the picture. You know, you have direct experience and you have this knowledge and this framework of understanding what all that means. So I'll be talking about that today, and I'm going to use sort of the context of my own personal journey. Not because it's all that special or unique, but on the contrary, I've seen a lot of people go through similar sort of stages in their journey of self-discovery. So I'll be talking about my own sort of journey through this, but again, I'll be pointing out where other people have the same experiences. All right, let's see if we get that to work. Excellent. So all good stories are sort of divided into three acts. So I'll start with Act 1. And for me, that was direct experience. That was the thing that sort of came first for me. And I'll give you a little bit of context and sort of my backstory. I've always been a seeker. I'm sure this is sounding familiar to a lot of you. I've always been a seeker. I've always been interested in sort of the big questions and trying to, understand why we're here. Even going back to my childhood, I always asked these questions of like, who am I really? What is this all about? And I would ask these questions as a child, and what I'd hear from, those around me and my parents was, well, go to church. You'll find some answers there to those kinds of questions. So I explored that, and I didn't really find the answers that I was looking for. What I found was, I didn't like feeling like there was an intermediary between me and sort of this truth, and I would be, I didn't like that there was someone whose job it was to sort of interpret God's will and tell me what that was. And I'm a fiercely independent person, so particularly for me, that just kind of didn't sit well. So I ruled that out. That wasn't the path for me. And I'm not here to bash religion, because I know that's really valuable to a lot of people. And there's definitely kernels of truth in all of the religions that we have. And if it makes you a better person, that's fantastic. But it wasn't the path for me. And I also became intensely interested in all things paranormal, because I felt like there was some clues to what was really going on in these sort of edge cases of reality and things that were happening that shouldn't be possible. It seemed like there was some truth there. So that always fascinated me. So my journey started with really diving into that. And I remember reading about remote viewing. It was one of those things that really sort of interested me, because it's pretty factual. It's one of those things that's pretty hard to refute. There's direct evidence. You're seeing something. You're able to corroborate what you're seeing. it felt to me like that was the hardest evidence you could get for something bigger, for something non-physical going on. And as I dove into books, this was in the days before the internet, so as I read everything that I could find, I came across a book that talked about remote viewers. Oh, there we go, thank you. I came across a book talking about remote viewing, and one of the things that this book mentioned was that some of the remote viewers that were in the Stargate program actually were going to the Monroe Institute as part of their training. So that led me to the Monroe Institute, and I picked up Bob Monroe's books. And that was what got me started. And I remember reading those at the time. I was probably in my early 20s. And that just blew me away. You know, documenting his experiences in sort of consciousness exploration was just amazing to me. And I remember thinking, if this is real, if what he's talking about is true, this changes everything. I mean, I couldn't understand, like, why is everybody not talking about this? I mean, this is like groundbreaking, world-changing stuff. So I'll give a quick overview of Bob's story for those of you. I'm sure many of you have heard it, but I'll give you the quick version of Bob's story. He was a successful radio broadcasting executive in the 50s. So he produced a lot of popular shows, radio shows, and achieved a lot of success in that endeavor. Worked in New York City, pretty normal everyday life. And around that time, TV started becoming more popular, and TV started replacing radio in people's living rooms. And he was faced with a choice to either try to transition his company and what he'd been doing for years into TV, or to try to do something else. So he went down that road. They started working on some TV production stuff, and he realized that he was just repeating himself, and that wasn't something that he felt like doing. So he ended up going in a different direction and started experimenting with sleep learning. So he formed a research division in his production company and started trying to understand how to help people learn while they're sleeping. The idea is you put something on, you're listening to something while you sleep, and you wake up and you've retained all that knowledge, which is a great idea, a great concept. So he started working on this and was testing these sort of technologies, listening to all different kinds of sounds, trying to figure out how to put himself to sleep. He was the guinea pig, so he was testing on himself, trying to figure out how he could put people to sleep and into a state of awareness where they could retain information while they're sleeping. And as he was doing these experiments, something unexpected happened to him, something that he never could have predicted or didn't even want to happen. What started happening was when he would go to bed at night, he would be overcome by this feeling of vibrations, this sort of like electricity sort of vibration feeling happening in his physical body. And it started happening regularly. And he kind of, was annoyed by it, didn't know what it meant, and he got into the habit of just waiting for these weird vibrations to stop so he could go to sleep every night. And one night, he was doing that. He was waiting for these vibrations to stop so he could go to sleep, and he was thinking about what he was going to do the next day. He flew glider planes, and he was thinking about the next day. He was going to go fly his glider plane, and he was imagining what it would be like to soar on the thermals and what that would feel like. And as he's sitting there imagining this, daydreaming and waiting for these vibrations to stop, he felt something hard bump up against his back. And he opened his eyes and realized that what was bumping up against his back was in fact the ceiling of his bedroom. So he was up there now looking down on his body in bed, and trying to figure out what was going on, and was instantly terrified, and he thought he was dying. And he tells this story of like he swam back through the air, clawing his way back into his body, and came back in and was totally, terrified and freaked out, thought he was dying, was convinced he was on death's door. So he went to his doctor, got checked out. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. He went to psychiatrists, and they couldn't find anything wrong with him. So when he figured out that this wasn't the end for him and he wasn't dying, he was overcome with curiosity. And that changed the course of his life, because that curiosity led him to try to understand what this phenomenon was and why this was happening to him. And so, being a man of means, he founded the Monroe Institute in the early 70s to primarily try to understand what was happening to him. And the way he tells this story is that his original intentions weren't all that altruistic. He was really genuinely trying to understand what was happening to him. And of course, that mission evolved from there a long way. But he brought scientists together and really wanted to study this phenomenon from a scientific perspective. So we've heard Tom's story of his early interactions with Bob Monroe and Dennis and how they got together and built the lab, and developed the audio technology to help other people have these experiences, because what Bob needed was more test subjects than just himself. This is the way that I've heard this story. So part of what he did was work on this sound technology to help other people get to this state, have these out-of-body experiences, so they could study more people. And at the same time, he was teaching other people how to have these experiences, and ended up developing educational programs that we run at the Monroe Institute to this day that help people access these states and learn how to use the tools of consciousness to explore the larger consciousness system. He also developed in defining this sort of technology and this brainwave entrainment technology to help people do this. He also identified states, specific states of consciousness that he used as guideposts for other people to get into these states of awareness, and he called them focus levels. So this is something you'll hear around Monroe Institute today if you get there. There's sort of different states of awareness that he gave these labels, and he used the term focus level and gave them numbers like focus 10, focus 12, focus 15, because he wanted to avoid any sort of religious or spiritual connotation. He didn't want to reuse existing terms that had some sort of meaning that was spiritual in nature. He really wanted to sort of think of this scientifically, and developed entrainment mixes, the audio mixes, to help people reach those specific states. So I'll spend a brief minute here. Let's see if we can get that to go. There we go. I'm betting most of you know what this is. So binaural beats, I think most of us are familiar with this. This is where the technology started, and I'll just spend a few minutes talking about the tech, because I've had quite a few questions here at the event about this. So it began with binaural beats, and this was discovered, as we've heard the story, by Dennis Menorek, who saw an article in Scientific American magazine talking about binaural beats and said, hey, let's try that. And it turned out to work really well. So the idea is you play a tone in one ear, you have another tone that's slightly different in another ear, and the difference between those two produces this binaural beat. And it's an auditory illusion. You get this sort of beating sensation or frequency or sound, and it's produced entirely in your head. So it is an auditory illusion. And Bob, created this technology, ended up calling it HemiSync, so we still have that around today, and it refers to this original binaural beat technology. But they do have limitations. So one of the things that we found over the years, as we've continued to evolve this audio technology, is that the effectiveness of a binaural beat stops at around 30 hertz or so. Like, in other words, when you have the difference between these two signals getting up above 30 hertz, hopefully that's okay, they stop being effective, and you start just hearing two different tones in your ears. So you start losing that entrainment effectiveness. And why that's important for us is we know today that there's a lot of brainwave activity above 30 hertz that's really interesting. We call this gamma. We give these bands of frequencies names. We call this gamma brainwaves. And we see these gamma brainwaves in really advanced meditators. When they've studied meditators and put the EEG on them, they see these sustained gamma brainwaves. And they've also been seen in people who are having lucid dreams. When they experience that moment of lucidity, that aha moment, we see spikes of 40 hertz gamma activity. So there's something interesting going on there. And so the sort of binaural beat technology didn't give us a great way to get to and train those kinds of frequencies. So we've been continually evolving that. And where we are today, over many iterations of different sort of ways to do this, is the latest generation of this is actually based in 3D, spatial audio. So what we're doing is we're taking different techniques. So we do use binaural beats. We actually have them in a simulated 3D space. We mix in a format called Dolby Atmos that gives us this immense sort of 3D space that we can work with. And we have these entrainment signals moving around in a 3D space in specific patterns. And we found that these are very effective. We also use other techniques like phase modulation to do things like gamma, which really sort of can help turbocharge these kinds of experiences. So the technology has evolved a lot. And the other thing that's interesting about using this 3D format is we can create soundscapes that are very realistic. So when we're giving someone an experience, if we can create this immersive, realistic sound environment for them to sort of place their awareness into, it helps them sort of turn off the data stream from the physical and really connect to a data stream from the non-physical. And you'll experience this if you come into the meditation room. We sort of create these 3D soundscapes. If you're in a flower garden, we have 3D sounds of noises of birds and trees, and it really helps create this immersive experience. So we find that to be very effective. Next slide. All right. So this is the last tech slide, I promise, and then I'll get back to the interesting stuff. So we've spent a lot of time learning, how to do this effectively, how to create effective meditations and experiences that help people sort of get into the non-physical states. And we found that there's a lot of things that go into making these effective. It's the signal technique, how we generate these entrainment signals is interesting and important. But as important to that is how we use them in combination. So when we look at brainwave activity, our brains are never really just exhibiting one frequency all the time. If you're in a meditative state, you may have a predominance of theta brainwaves, but it's not like your entire brain is nothing but theta. There's always something else going on. And over the years, the team at Monroe has sort of discovered that different states of awareness end up having these different mixes of different brainwaves. So when we create an experience, we're actually creating mixes of different brainwave entrainment signals to help target a specific state. So like we have a recipe for what we call Focus 10, which is a mind-awake, body asleep state. We have different recipes for these different states. The other thing that's important in these experiences is the guidance. Many of the experiences that we do are guided. You're actually hearing a voice talk you through an experience. What's helpful about that is when you get into these states, if you're running your to-do list in your mind of like, what am I supposed to do now in this state and what happens next, you're engaging your logical mind, you're generating lots of beta brain waves, and you're potentially pulling yourself out of that state. So what's helpful about the guidance is that it allows you to let all that go and just sort of relax and allow the guidance to just take you where you need to go. You don't have to think and plan what you're doing. You don't have to analyze what's happening. The guidance helps you just let go of that. And then we have this all going over different backgrounds. We can embed signals in music. We use pink noise as well. We found over the years that when you're embedding these entrainment signals into pink noise, it's effective because your brain is sort of trained to find signal in noise. Our awareness is bombarded by, tons of information all the time, and our brains are good at picking out what's important. So when we have this sort of uniform field of random noise in the background and these signals are embedded in it, your brain is sort of trained to pick out the signal in the noise. And we found that sort of helps make it more effective. And then all this is changing over time as we're creating these experiences, we're guiding you through specific states, and you're doing things over time. All right, so back to, I'll sum this up. If we forget all the tech stuff, we can go to the next slide. Anyway, in the 90s, there was an article in Wall Street Journal magazine, and it was from this Buddhist monk, head of a temple, who came to the Monroe Institute and did the Gateway program and said people were experiencing in that program states of consciousness that took him years of sitting. So this, I think, sums up what our whole approach to the technology is at Monroe. It's trying to give people access to these states that would otherwise take a whole lot of effort to get to. 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, you could sit in a cave for 5 years and work on getting to these states. And now we're aiming to bring these states of awareness and make them available to everyone because there's such profound truths to be found in these states of awareness, in this exploration. So, all right, I'll get back to the story here. So I read Bob's books in my early 20s, and then I kind of got busy with career and family, like we all do. And it wasn't until about 15 years ago that I kind of came back to it. I had just left my job in corporate IT that I'd been at for a decade, and I left to do a startup, so I was doing that, and I was on my own schedule, so I felt like I had the time to devote to figuring out if what Bob was saying was actually happening, was real. And I decided I had to just prove this, because this had sort of stuck with me. I read these books a long time ago, but it had never really left my awareness. I was always thinking in the back of my mind, I really need to know if this is for real. So I very much wanted to have Bob's classic out-of-body experience that he wrote about. And I bought the Gateway experiences, the exercises, you could get them for home. And I bought those and I would do them every day. Every afternoon I would do one of the exercises from Gateway, and I just kept going for months. And I desperately wanted to have that experience that Bob wrote about, where you're peeling out of your body and you end up standing there next to yourself, looking at yourself in bed. And that didn't end up happening for me. It did end up happening eventually, but what first started for me was that I would never experience anything during these exercises. I was listening to them, and I know now that I was just getting in my own way. I was constantly analyzing what was happening. Was that a point of light? What was that over there? So I was just totally getting in my own way. But what happened was, at night, I started having spontaneous lucid dreams. And those were really interesting to me. And all of the most interesting experiences that I've had have been through lucid dreams. So these started happening, and I have had lots of these experiences. I kind of stopped counting, but really profound experiences. And I wanted to share a couple of those experiences because I think they are a key part of my story, part of many people's story as they start down this path. But I think they help illustrate why direct experience is important. All right, there we go. Okay. So I promised there was not a lot of text on my slides. So the first experience that I'll share was a lucid dream, and this was a profound experience for me because it was the best validation that I've ever gotten that what I was experiencing was real. So this happened about 10 years ago. I was on a vacation with my family. We were all, in a hotel room sleeping together in the same room. So, normal night, I go to bed. I had this amazing lucid dream where I was in this really beautiful tropical environment, kind of flying around and checking things out. And I decided, well, let's go see what's going on underwater. So I go down underwater and I'm kind of flying through the water underwater. No need to swim when you're out of body. And out of nowhere, I'm kind of checking things out. And this dolphin comes up to me and it clearly has a purpose for getting towards me. And it's sticking right by my side. And I'm swimming around and I'm going all these places. And this dolphin is right there beside me. And I'm wondering, what's going on with this dolphin? That's a little odd, but okay, I went with it. And so this experience was really cool. It had ended, and I wake up in my bed, and I sit up, and because we're all sleeping in the same room, my daughter gets up at the same time, and she sits up, and she looks at me, and she says, "Dad, I just had the most amazing dream. I was a dolphin, and we were in the water, and we were swimming together, and I was right next to you, and we were seeing all these amazing things." And I was just blown away. That was incredible. To have a shared experience like that just really blew me away. I could not refute that. There was no way I could explain that any other way. For us to come out of that experience at the same time, literally sit up at the same time, coming out of that experience, was just amazing.
How old was she?
She was about 6 at the time. So not at an age where she would even understand what a lucid dream was or any of this stuff. She just had this amazing experience and wanted to share it with me. So that was really profound. And that to me, again, was the best validation that I had because I know, I'll get into more of this, but this was incredible validation. So I'll share another one. This also was a lucid dream. And a lot of these happened around that same time frame. And in this experience, I found myself aware in this beautiful outdoor setting, kind of like a park-like setting. There was kind of rolling hills, and in this one area, there was a tree on top of this hill. And there were these, I could see in the distance, and I was flying around, because it's always fun to fly when you're, in a lucid dream. And I see in the distance, there's this tree, and there's these light beings sort of flying in a spiral around this tree. Looks kind of something like this. Thanks to AI, I can generate these really cool images. But they were, I guess you'd describe them as classical sort of angel kind of beings. They had wings, they were made of light, and they were flying around. So I figure, all right, I'll go fly over there and see what's going on. And I start flying around this tree with these beings. And as I'm doing that, one of the beings reaches out a hand, clearly sort of an invitation. And I reach out my hand, and we just sort of touch fingertips. And in that instant, I felt the most incredible surge of just unconditional love and compassion. Something that I have never experienced, and I don't think I ever could experience in waking reality. It was as if this being instantly knew everything I'd ever done, every thought I'd ever had, everything I was capable of, and all of it was perfect. It was just this unconditional acceptance. And I learned from that experience what true unconditional love and compassion really feels like. And that was so incredible to me and was foundational. So again, these direct experiences, it's hard to put these into words. I can describe this, but it's a whole different thing to experience it. And I'll share one more. So yet again, another lucid dream. All my interesting stuff happened in lucid dreams. In this one, I found myself aware in this dream in a house. There were other people in this house. Wasn't quite sure what was going on. And this woman came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm here to do some energy work on you." I said, "Okay, cool." So went into this room and I lie down. And she starts doing some energy work on me, and sort of energy is flowing around, and it's really cool. And she sort of put her hands on either side of my head and was doing this sort of energy work. And inside my head, I started hearing this tone, this sound. It was just a basic sort of pure, kind of sine wave kind of sound, just a tone. But it's hard to describe. That tone, that sound was me. Like I was the sound. It was everything that I ever was and ever will be. It was my entire, IUOC was represented in this single sound. And it was just this amazing feeling of that's who I am. It felt like I was getting a tune-up in a sense, like, hey, remember, this is who you are. It was like, this was me. This was the sound. And it was incredible. What strikes me about these experiences, that the second two experiences particularly, if we think that dreams are just sort of these random firings of our brain as we go to sleep and we're just replaying the day's events or replaying past experiences, that for me doesn't account for these. These were truly novel experiences to me. I have never experienced anything like these experiences. I don't think there's an analog for this in waking reality. So clearly for me, something was going on here that was beyond just my brain randomly replaying my past experiences. So these experiences and many others led me to a few profound truths or fundamental truths that I got from these experiences. So the first one of these is that I'm more than my physical body. If you've been to Monroe, you've heard this. This is like everyone's talking. This is the thing at Monroe. This is the one piece of dogma, potentially, that we ask people to consider when they come to Monroe. You may be more than your physical body. So my experiences really helped me understand this and gave me, especially the ones that are validating, gave me real experience to know this and not just believe it, because this is not a new idea, right? Religions have been saying this forever, for thousands of years. But it's one thing to believe this or take it on faith. It's an entirely different thing to know it as certain through your own direct experience that you cannot refute. And that has a lot of implications, and I'll get into that. But that was one of the truths that I found. The second one, which kind of falls out of the first one, is that I survive physical death, and we all do. I've had plenty of experiences where I feel like I'm meeting people who have crossed over, or I'm in areas where people have come after their physical existence. So again, I have a lot of these experiences. Now, I can't validate those experiences, but because I've validated other experiences and these are of that same quality, I kind of take them at face value. So for me, this is now a truth. This is not something I believe. This is something that I know, but based on my own experience. And it removes this incredible fear, right? Because we're all born with this fear of death. This is something that Bob Monroe talked about a lot, is this sense of freedom, being free of this fear of physical death and not having to worry about that. And the worst thing that can happen is I die and something terrible happens. Well, I don't really die. I survive death. I'm just going to go on and do something different, maybe come back as someone else. So that's really a tremendous sense of freedom that you can take from that truth. And the last truth that I've found through my experiences is that I have had more than one life experience. So for me, this concept of reincarnation is a reality. Again, through experiences where I've looked at, past life experiences. I know that this is a fact for me. I know just, through my own experience. And I've had, other experiences where I've kind of looked at my larger sort of span over multiple lifetimes, and it's helped me understand a lot about who I am now and why I'm here now, and I'll get more into that a bit later. So now I was in an interesting place. After having these experiences and validating these truths for myself, I had some answers, but it's in the same sense I was left with even bigger questions. Because now I had this disconnect between my direct experience and everything that science is telling us. So I have these experiences that say I'm more than physical and all that stuff. But everything we know about science is telling us that can't be possible. And the picture of the Large Hadron Collider here is a perfect example of that. We're using our science to probe deeper and deeper into bits of matter, into the materialism. We're just diving as deep as we can into materialism. So now I'm at this point of sort of cognitive dissonance because I know one thing to be true, but everything that everyone else is telling me is that it can't be true based on what we understand of reality. And I've spoken with other people who have had these experiences and come to this same point. So I don't think this is unique to me. And it can be a challenge because for people who may have had an experience that they can't quite validate in the way that I have, you sort of have this amazing experience and then you get back into day-to-day reality and you're sort of, again, in this general worldview of materialism, and it can start to sort of poke holes in your experiences. I've talked to people who start to doubt, well, I had this amazing experience at the time, but now I wonder, was it real? This is the challenge, I think, with this, because we don't have a model that explains that. And I didn't at the time. And again, this was an uncomfortable place for me to be. And I was looking for answers to this. So I had another, key problem that I had to solve after I had these experiences to figure out what they meant, how they were possible. And I would like to thank Tom personally for rescuing me from that situation, because I found MBT, and this was Act 2 for me. This is where I went down the rabbit hole of MBT. I got the books, read the books, got the audio books, and loved hearing Tom's voice tell this whole story, which was really great. So this gave me finally what I was looking for. This completed the picture of my experiences, and I had a way of understanding how they were possible and what they meant and what the purpose was behind this. So we all know Tom's story. I won't talk about MBT because you all know that. You know that obviously Tom had his beginnings at the Monroe Institute. Tom is also referenced in Bob Monroe's books. Bob talked about other people that were having experiences, and Tom is TC physicist in those books if you've read them. And Tom was also one of the original explorers, which is really cool. Bob would put people into the booth, as he called it, and would train them how to have these experiences and train them how to interact in real time as they were having the experiences. So Bob would talk people through different experiences, and he was trying to understand what was going on, and he would have them perform different things in the non-physical or ask questions or interact with beings, and would help sort of guide them through all these interactions. And we've got these up on our YouTube channel on Monroe Institute, so you can check them out. They're really interesting stuff because you can hear like the raw emotion that people are going through as they're having these experiences. So that's really cool to hear. The other thing that struck me with MBT is its elegant simplicity. Starting, as we know, starting with two simple things, raw, unbounded awareness and evolution, we get the explanation of everything that we have. We get who we are, why we're here, how physics works, why it works that way, solving paradoxes. It was just like I was so happy that I found this because it completed, all of these questions for me. So from my deep dive into MBT, I came up with some other fundamental truths. Again, I'm sure you'll recognize these. The first one that was big for me was that consciousness is fundamental, everything else is virtual. This was important for me particularly because so many of my experiences happened in lucid dreams. And this helped me sort of reframe my understanding. You say it's a dream and you can sort of dismiss it. Oh, it was just a dream, you're just having some weird experience. But what I came to understand was that the dream is just another virtual reality. And in my experiences in lucid dreams, it was always every bit as real as this is now. Like there was absolutely no distinction in sort of the quality of the reality and the experience. I would be in this environment and it would be absolutely fundamentally real. So this explained to me how that could be possible. So it's just another reality frame. It's another virtual reality. It's no less real than this is in that sense. It's just in a different environment with a different rule set. So this was very helpful for me, and one of the core things that I took away from MBT. The other thing that helped me a lot too was knowing that consciousness is fundamental. When I was trying to have these out-of-body experiences, I realized that, and then Tom had said this, you're not going out of your body, you're going into your consciousness. this mindset shift really helped me. And I've shared this with a lot of people, and it helps them as well, at Monroe, because if you think about it as this big thing, this impossible thing of going out of your body and can't really happen, it's different to think about it as going into your consciousness. That's something you do every night. You dream all the time. That's a natural thing. So that, to me, was just very helpful. So the second truth that I took away from MBT was that consciousness is information. This was, again, really helpful for me. And it's not just information, it's digital information, right? We've heard the story of how, the unbounded awareness became the manifold, and how it became this and that and 1 and 0 and yes or no. So we have reality as this computed information system, and it helped me understand how it's possible to access the database or the Akashic records or whatever you want to call it, how it's possible to look at future probabilities, because we can just use the information we have to compute what's probable to happen in the future. So this was really foundational for me. And in my experience, going back to that experience of myself as sound, that to me, I recognize that as an interesting metaphor for information, because sound is some kind of structured representation of information, right? It's some cyclical repetition of information. And I think that was, a good metaphor for me. I imagine it was quite dumbed down so that I can understand it as I am. I don't think, I could express the entirety of my being in a simple sine wave. So I think that was for my benefit. But again, it helped me understand this at sort of an intuitive level, that consciousness is information, because I was the information. The sound was the information, and that was me. It was all of me. So it helped for me to sort of experience something around this. And then I think the biggest thing that I took away from MBT was a sense of purpose. This to me was really important, because it was one of the things that I was missing in my experiences. And it gives us purpose at sort of the grand scale, the purpose of evolving toward low entropy. So becoming love, getting rid of fear, getting rid of ego. All of those things were really foundational to me. And what helped me too is my experience with these sort of light beings around the tree. It gave me a sort of intuitive understanding of what that means, what it means to become love, because I was able to experience what that's actually like, this truly unconditional love and true compassion. So I feel lucky that I've been able to have that kind of experience that, to me, validates this. So now we get to Act 3 of my journey. And this is what Bob Monroe called a different overview. So I had these experiences through what I had done at Monroe Institute, and those got me a long way, helped me really understand what was going on. And I had MBT giving me a framework for understanding those experiences, why they happen, how they happen, what they mean, and it really gave me, beyond the sense of the bigger purpose of the LCS, the larger conscious system, it gave me a sense of my own purpose, because I was able to look at who I am over the context of multiple lifetimes and why I'm here, specifically in this lifetime, and what my purpose is here. So it helped me understand that. And having these experiences, when Bob Monroe talked about this, he talked about converting beliefs into knowns. And experience is what you do, what you use to do that. It's the best tool in his mind to convert your beliefs into something you know, because you've directly experienced it. So this is what he called this different overview. It's as you've collected up this new set of knowns, this new understanding of who you are and why you're here, that's the different overview. It's like you're sort of stepping back from your life experience and sort of understanding it in the larger context of multiple experiences and who you are and why you're here. So I've talked to other people about this as well, and you get to this point where it really changes the human experience. It changes what it means to be human, because you're no longer this accidental byproduct of a bunch of chemicals that got together in a puddle. Life is not some accident. There's a purpose to it. There's a meaning to it. And for me, it really changed my priorities. There were some real profound impacts from going down this path. So prior to all of this, I was like everyone else in sort of Western culture, working on, having a nice job, a nice house, and all the stuff, all the material stuff that we think is important in our culture. And that all shifted, because I realized that wasn't the reason I was here. If I'm here over multiple lifetimes, the goal can't be to just accumulate a bunch of stuff. That's useless. So that helped me, and it really shifted my priorities to the point where, and I'm lucky because my wife was going through this at the same time as me, because doing this alone would have been hard. But we got to the point where we said, okay, we're going to do something different. We know that experiences and relationships are more important than the material stuff. So we sold everything we own, everything, the house, cars, and we bought a sailboat. We moved onto a boat. We lived on it for 4 years, and we basically sailed, homeschooled our 2 girls, and sailed mostly around the Bahamas for 4 years. And that to me was an impact of this, coming to an understanding of purpose. And it wasn't to just accumulate a bunch of stuff. And this was such a great experience too, because when I stepped back from sort of everyday society and life and looked at it from a distance, I could see it for what it was. I understood why I was in that sort of, it's the rat race. It's chasing all those things that we are told are important. Seeing it from a distance helped really give me new perspective, and again, just furthered my understanding of my purpose and why I'm here. And I know at this point that my purpose now is to help other people along this journey. When I look back at all of my past life experiences, it's led me to this point. And even when I look at my current life experiences, everything that I've learned in my career or in my experiences has gotten me to the point where I am now to be here doing this work specifically. So I feel lucky that I've been able to sort of derive this sense of purpose from these experiences. So my priorities changed. The other thing that happened to me was understanding that we're all part of the same larger consciousness system. You start to see this sort of bigger concept of self. I have myself, I have my individual persona that I'm here as now, but at a fundamental level, we're all the same self, right? We're all fingers on the same hand. So when you experience that and you internalize that, it gives you this sense of compassion, because you realize that that person is just me. That's just another form of consciousness. We're interacting with each other, but that person is just another. At a deeper level, we're all one. We have this oneness. So for me, it helped me feel this sense of compassion, and that to me changed the way that I deal with people, the way that I deal with situations, relationships. All of that stuff changed as a result of this. And then the other thing that happened was, as I look now at my life experiences, whether they're positive or negative, I'm able to put them in this larger context and understand that they're actually just learning experiences. They're happening for a reason. Whether they're good or bad, there's something to be gained from those experiences. And yeah, going through bad stuff is not fun at all, but there's a reason for that. There's something to be gained even from those experiences. And it's given me this greater appreciation for life. We have this experience. We're lucky to be here. There's so much that you can do, so much that can happen. It's really this unique environment that gives us this unique rule set. And it's really a gift. So it's helped me, and I've talked to other people that have this experience as well. It's helped me really sort of cherish all the time that we have here. So then if we take another step back from this different overview and sort of take a bigger perspective, if I step back from my own life and my own sort of life experiences, and now I look at sort of the world as a whole, what would it be like if everyone had this different overview, if everyone had these experiences and everyone understood that at the fundamental level, we're all connected. We're all here together. We're all part of the same awareness, creating this experience together. How would that change the world? You can imagine, what would it be like if we had this incredible sense of empathy at a global scale? If we all had this sense of empathy and understanding, and we all understood that, however different we are, we're all really the same. We've all been different races and different sexes and in different situations over multiple lifetimes. Those differences are just illusions. We're all here together. We're all fundamentally part of the same thing. So one of the things as we think about how that might change society, that would be fundamental, because everything that we have, the way that we organize our society, the laws that we make, the social systems we put in place, our education, the economy, all of this is based on materialism. It's based on this worldview that we currently live in. And all of those systems are set up by people, individual people, who make decisions about what our laws should be and how we should set things up and organize our society. And when those people change, those things will follow. And I believe that's the only way for there to be any lasting change. We have to change ourselves. We have to change our understanding of who we are and get to that point where we as a global society truly understand, the nature of our experience and why we're here. And so we can imagine what that world would be like. And Bob Monroe, in one of his books, writes about one of his out-of-body experiences where he went to the future and saw, what the future of mankind was like. And he was told that this was a potential future, that could be the future of mankind in 1,000 years or so. And it was this kind of society where there weren't borders and wars, and we weren't killing each other over resources or ideas. And we lived together in harmony, and we lived in harmony with the environment. We weren't killing our planet. So that's the kind of thing that I think this awakening can get us to, this awakening if it happens at a global scale. And so this is our mission at the Monroe Institute. This is what we do. And we call this the global awakening of human consciousness. And we aim to, as we heard, we're aiming to reach 1% of the world's population with a direct experience of expanded awareness. Because that to us is the tipping point, where then this starts to then, sort of go through society, and everyone starts to have this understanding of who we truly are and why we're here. And that changes the world and our future. So thank you.